Have you wrestled with imposter syndrome, excessive and unsubstantiated self-doubt coupled with an uncanny lack of confidence? I'm your host, Betty Danowitz. Listen as I interview highly successful individuals about their experience with this imposter syndrome and how it manifests itself in their lives in this If You Ask Betty podcast series dealing with imposter syndrome. Hi, Michelle. Thanks for being on the podcast.
Hey, Betty. How are you today?
Doing good. I'm doing really good. So, Michelle, tell us about you.
It's always such a hard question. I have been in learning and development for over 20-something years. I have worked in all sorts of industries, and my hobbies have ranged from competitive ballroom dancing to skydiving to taking the sommelier test to see if I could. I try everything. And I have a dachshund. Part of my identity.
You do. You do. Tell us about your dachshund.
Ringo Starr.
I mean, the perfect name.
I show him off, but he's off guarding the house at the moment.
Yes.
It's his job. He takes it very seriously.
Yeah. I don't blame him at all. Okay, so more than 20 years in learning and development. I'm right there with you. I think that once you hit 20 years, you shouldn't have to count anymore. So I think we just always say
20 odd years is what I tell people.
Yeah. So what would you say are your biggest accomplishments in life and in work?
So knowing this question was coming, I didn't know what to say. All I could think of is that back in 2007, one of my younger sisters, passed away, and I put together a scholarship fund in her memory. She was early 20s, and that's all I could think of. So I had to ask my partner, and so what are my accomplishments? And then I wrote them down. And he said that I had phases in my life.
Oh,
great. I had phases. But he says, I was a top technology creator and influencer. I owned my own business for a decade. I achieved sommelier status. I had a syndicated wine blog. I was one of the first to embrace social media in learning. And I was a specialist on copyright in the digital age. And now I'm an AI strategist.
And so
there you go.
You had to ask, which I think I appreciate your vulnerability in sharing that, like, very open and honestly, like, I don't know. Why do you think it was so hard for you to recall those things?
It's not that it was hard to recall. It's that I didn't really think of a lot of them as accomplishments, I guess.
Okay. Yeah.
I mean, I took the sommelier test to see if I could. I just wanted to know if I passed it or not. And I did. I guess I wasn't thinking the wine thing was such a different part of my life at this point. I wasn't even thinking, oh, right, Gannett syndicated my wine blog because that was so long ago, and I did. I wrote for a very popular technology blog once upon a time and had to constantly check my ratings on Tech Meme every day. Or where am I on Tech Meme? How much am I going to get paid for my hits today? But so long ago. I mean, we were just getting new cell phones. I was rating Blackberries.
Oh my goodness.
Pre-iPhone. So
yeah.
it was kind of like, it was really a different phase, so copyright came out of that, my love for understanding copyright and things. And that a lot of that came out of that because people stole my content when I was a wine writer. And that was my big thing. It was my big brand for a long time. Now I ran my own company for 10 years and it was a big deal. It was the best time in my life for a job until now. And I loved it. I spoke at conferences and I had a great brand. And I really was in the front of what was then called Web 2.0, and now it's just everyday life. And I was so early into Twitter because I was writing for that blog at the time. And because of that, I was early. I was one of the first people doing Twitter for learning. I was doing workshops on Web 2.0 for learning. I was just really ahead, and I loved it. And
Yeah.
So that they are accomplishments. I just feel like they were just so far in the past that I tend to, I guess, brush them off now because
Just,
I feel like I haven't
yeah.
had a lot in the recent few years,
You
which
just
maybe
kind of
isn't true, but
moved
it's
on
just my current
and
state of
moved
mind.
on to the next. And so what's behind kind of gets forgotten. So if I were to ask other people that question, if I were to say, hey, tell us about Michelle, what would they say?
Well, I mean, that's what he said. I think they would say that I am a risk taker. A lot of people who know me know that I've done ridiculous things in my life, like hot air ballooning and jumping out of airplanes. And I don't just do those like once. I follow them through for long periods of time.
Okay.
or competitive or competitive ballroom dance because I get like stuck on something and I run with it,
Mm-hmm.
you know,
Mm-hmm.
and or the wine thing, right? So, but I think they'll also tell you that because of the risk taking, I also hop from thing to thing to thing, and I don't necessarily know if that well-rounded is good or bad. So I know when I interviewed for a lot of jobs last year, it was, wow, you have a lot of diverse experience. And so I never know if that's great or is that, we really wish you'd just been at the same company for the last 20 years of your life. But
Yeah.
I'm
Well,
always, whenever I'm hired somewhere, I'm an innovator and I'm brought in to disrupt things. And I think people would say that about me.
yeah, agreed. So, what has been your experience with imposter syndrome?
um, I think I have trouble with perception versus reality. And I really started like digging into this yesterday with I kind of gave myself my own self therapy session on this to prep. And I I had to sort of
Mm-hmm.
pinpoint when did I really start dealing with this? And not in my childhood or anything like that. I was always a big theater kid. And so
Yeah.
I didn't have imposter syndrome. I just went out there and tried to get the lead. So I was a cheerleader and I was just always on stage in one way or another. And so imposter syndrome didn't really hit me until about 2011. And I really had to like dig into this the other day. And I was in this great friend group of mostly people in the L&D industry at the time. And for a ridiculous reason, someone decided in that group that she didn't care for me anymore. And I was evicted
Oy.
from the friend group. And these were people that I thought were like ride or die friends in some case. And they all
Mm-hmm.
kind of took on a lemming mentality and said, well, she doesn't like this girl. We're not going to like her either. And so at that point, I'm running my own business. I'm going to conferences. And it became so uncomfortable for me at the conferences to even be there with all of these people. And this is where the perception versus reality thing starts. I felt uncomfortable. Were they making me uncomfortable on
Mm-hmm.
purpose? I don't know. I had the perception I was not welcome. I don't know how much of that was real. And I started to think I'm not good enough to be here anymore. And I started to withdraw. And about that same time, I'd started a relationship with my current partner. And I moved to be with him and I gave up my business and started a corporate job and I became what I call a corporate drone because the jobs I took, big, giant company, I was just one of thousands. And I wasn't in love with my job anymore. And I stayed that way for a long time. And I let my brand die. I didn't go to conferences. I didn't participate on LinkedIn. I didn't really do anything. And my brand died. And I woke up a couple years later and I realized I was sort of just his girlfriend and I had no brand and I just worked in a corporation. And now is that reality or was that just my perception? I don't know. I honestly don't know. Did I still have a brand? I don't know. But I started to feel like I'm just the girlfriend, right? No one made me feel that way. I made me feel that way. And that all of this just was my imposter syndrome. And then, but I've shaken that off this year. I sort of decided last year I was unemployed for 6 months, and that was soul shattering. And I realized you can't let your brand or anything die. You have to be active in putting yourself out there. And it sort of shocked me into action. So now I'm out there again. I'm presenting, I'm on LinkedIn, I'm talking about things, and I love it. And it's like, why didn't I do this?
Right.
There was
Except
nothing
how you felt
stopping me.
inside.
What was stopping me? Yeah. So I hate that it took this horrible 6 months of unemployment to just knock my head kind of straight on this. But that is like the one benefit of being unemployed, is that I figured this out. I could just do this.
Yeah.
But yeah, I should have done this 10 years ago. I never should have stopped doing this. But I did. I let those people get into my head, and then I let myself get into my head. And I shouldn't have done it.
Yeah. Every day.
And now I fight it at work every day. Every day I fight imposter syndrome. And it is a struggle, because it's the people I love to work with most that cause my imposter syndrome. Because I have certain hangups. I have hangups about my education, and I have hangups about how smart I am. And I work with very smart people. And like one day I had a very dear friend at work introduce a guy at work as, this guy has written books. Oh my gosh, Siri's talking to me. That this guy has written books, and he's made master's degrees. And here's Michelle. She used to do competitive ballroom dancing. And I'm like, and I had to tell him later, don't introduce me like that. Here are all the things I've accomplished. Here are the certifications I've got. And he's like, oh, you're right. I'm sorry. I just did that because I love that you used to do competitive ballroom dancing. It makes you so creative. I'm like, not sure the client feels that way. But I don't feel like my education measures up to a lot of these people. And a lot of the people I work with are a lot louder and more verbose than I am. And I spend a lot of time fighting to get heard. And eventually I just give up and stop talking, because I'm like, maybe they don't even want to hear my opinion. And all that just compounds to, I'm not smart enough to be here.
Okay.
It happens every day.
So when you're having an episode of this imposter syndrome, how does it manifest itself? So like for some people, it's like perfectionism or overachieving or even self-sabotage. Like, what do you experience? What happens?
I withdraw. I just kind of stop. I stop talking in meetings. I just kind of withdraw, and I'll end up taking on less work because I've stopped participating. And it's bad. And then I've got self-doubt everywhere at this point. And and by that point, then it snowballs, right? So I'm taking on less work, and I'm doing less. So then it becomes self-fulfilling.
Yeah. This is self-fulfilling.
Aren't hearing my voice because I'm not doing anything. So yeah, it kind of is self-sabotage in that way, I guess.
And that's kind of what you described with when you said you let your brand die. And, you don't really know if that's what happened, but that's how it felt, was because nobody was talking to you or about you, or because you just sort of like that Homer Simpson meme where he just kind of slinks back into the bushes. Like, is that kind of how it happens? Yeah.
Yeah. If I don't feel smart enough or worthy enough, I just kind of disappear like a
So
little
then when you,
turtle.
yeah, so then when you disappear, like what happens? What do you do?
So I'm getting better. I'm starting to acknowledge this in myself, and I'm getting better at talking about it. I have this amazing manager right now, and she treats me much more like a peer than a direct. And she will let me vent and go off. And she knows that I have a way that I will have my initial emotional explosion about something, but then I'll start solutioning. I have to have a initial reaction.
An emotional outburst. Yes.
Mhm.
We're all entitled to that, I think.
But yeah, I tend to keep that to certain people.
Mm-hmm.
But she's one of them because I trust her, and she tends to get me through it, and then I'll start the next part, which is a much more positive part. But she's very supportive of me on this thing, and she tends to know what to say.
Mm.
And she also tends to know, well, okay, you're in this spot now. I'm going to put you on this project, and see, you're fine. You're smart enough to be here. Um, and I have the right group of friends around me now. My partner, my friends, I have the right group of people around me now that when I do start, I can talk to them
Yeah.
about this. When I notice myself just really doing this, I talk to people, and they're the right group of people to kind of talk me off the ledge and back into reality versus my perception.
Mm-hmm.
And then finally, I write it down because sometimes that's all it takes for me to go, none of this
Mm-hmm.
is like what's really happening. Because when I write it down, I'm like, okay, I'm just being silly. Because I read this and I'm like, oh, that's not what's happening.
Yeah. Yeah. So when you think about sort of the way that this manifests, this imposter syndrome manifests itself in your life, so the sort of the slinking back, the quieting, and those types of things, are there contributing factors? So like in other episodes, we've talked about triggers, right? Common triggers like being new at a job, being newly measured, uh, being alone, isolated, those types of things. That's why there was such an uprise of imposter syndrome during COVID. But I'm wondering, is there something else about you that makes this sort of imposter syndrome phenomenon happen?
For me, one of my biggest regrets is I never got my master's degree. I did
Mm,
my bachelor's degree really rapidly. I started with a degree in theater, and my parents were like, so unless you're going to play the dumb blonde on stage the rest of your life because you're good at comedy but drama's not your thing, um, we're not going to pay for this. You're just going to be a waitress. um, I'm like, okay. So they
hmm,
convinced me to switch to English and some other things. And in order to get the English degree, I'd switched from a tiny school to a state school and all this other stuff and get anyway, I in order to get the degree I ended up getting in technical writing and English, I had to do that entire degree at a new school for the equivalent of 4 years in two.
mm,
So I was
wow.
doing 22 to 24 credit hours per quarter. And I was so burned out by the time I graduated that you couldn't pay me to go on and get my master's. And I regret it because I'd been accepted to Loyola in New Orleans and I should have done it. It's my biggest regret in my entire life is that I didn't just
Mm,
go. But my parents weren't going to pay for it. I had no way to figure out how to pay for it at the time. And I was so burned out. And I just never followed up. And so I'm super sensitive about this fact I don't have a master's degree.
hmm,
And so being surrounded by people on a daily basis who have master's degrees and who have written books. I'm in books. I've contributed chapters to books. I have 25 years experience in this industry, which actually, in some cases, I think is better than a master's degree because I'm pretty sure that some of the theory doesn't really apply to real life.
Correct. That's correct.
But I just still feel like I'm not as smart. So that is my trigger. That is my number one trigger. I'm just not as smart as the rest of them.
Yeah.
And it gets me every time.
Can I ask you this? Has anyone ever said, "Oh, well, don't ask Michelle. She doesn't have a master's degree"?
No, but it has affected me in like the job search and things like that. And so that hasn't helped.
Yeah. So okay, that's fair because a lot of jobs, the job postings, require or request a master's degree, especially the higher up you get in an organization. But you've never actually had somebody say,
No.
if only you had this master's degree,
No.
you might have gotten this. So that no one's actually said that to you, but that is something that the job posting makes you feel like.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, I was hired for this job because I have a wealth of experience, not because of my education. And I love this job. I actually love what I do right now.
Yeah.
But I still have this like weird trigger about this.
Yeah.
It kicks me off every time.
Yeah. You're not the only one. I'll tell you that. I could do another series on, do you really need that degree? But we're not talking about that today.
Believe you do. That said, I'm going to actually go back and try and get a master's degree starting this fall, but it's in artificial intelligence and business.
Well, that sounds like way more fun than anything else.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. That sounds like a fun project. Yeah.
Yeah.
So anything else about you that you think sort of makes this imposter syndrome thing happen?
I think I've always struggled, especially these last like 20 years. I think I've always struggled with self-confidence. I didn't have that when I ran my own business. I don't know why. Really not that much, but yeah, maybe the last 15 years then. I just now I don't know why. Maybe it's because I was locked down in these gigantic corporate environments and it was very, they're not supportive of individuals. At least my particular corporate environments were not overly supportive of the individual. There wasn't a lot of development. If there was anything, you had to go do it yourself. And you just kind of settle into your own little box. And maybe that did not help me. I don't know. I don't know why my self-confidence kind of took a nosedive, but when it did, I've really struggled with bringing it back. And
sure.
I think that's a big part of it too.
Yeah. What about growing up? Are you an only? Are you a firstborn?
I am an only originally. My parents separated, and when I was in my 20s, I acquired 3 younger sisters.
Okay.
But and we're close.
But you were raised as an only.
Older, yeah. And they were in their teens, 20s by then too. But
do you think that has anything to do with it? The only child part of it?
I was very shy initially. And then mom said, well, maybe she'll be less shy if we get her dance lessons, which then opened up, she created a monster.
That's on her.
Where I became like, I have to be on stage all the time. So I don't know. I don't know if that had anything to do with it or not, but I was always in all the plays. I was in cheerleading. I was dancing. with Cincinnati Ballet Company at a very young age. In a little apprenticeship program. I was in the Nutcracker in Cincinnati. I was always just out there doing things in front of people. That's why I like training. And it was like, okay, I can't be in theater professionally, but I can still get up on stage and do something in front of people.
Yeah. We're all performers in our hearts in one way or another. Some of us are, elegant facilitators. Some of us are comedians. whether,
I'm somewhere in
sorry,
between.
somewhere in
I
between. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So many of the people from my original theater program in college are actually in learning and development now, and I think that's so perfect and so funny.
Yeah. Wouldn't it have been funny if someone showed up at one of your play practices and was like, "Hey, guess what? I'm from the future, and all of you are going to end up in corporate training someday. Have a good show.
Have fun.
Have a good
There's a
time right
chip
now
in your
because
future.
in a minute you're going to be going to conferences, teaching people shit, and then going to karaoke after, and that's going to be your musical theater." Yeah.
That was the funnest thing. Like when I ran my own business and I was out there teaching workshops and going to conferences all the time, that was so much fun. And I think that's why I'm having fun now. I'm back to training people. Like I'm
Yeah.
training people on AI, but I love it. And I'm helping clients understand AI and I love it.
Yeah.
And
There's something
it's,
magical about seeing the light bulb go on when you're trying to help somebody understand something. There really is.
yes, yes.
Yeah.
I love that opportunity and that chance and new technology. I just love anyway. And this idea to really explain it and to help people strategize and understand how to use it, it makes me so excited.
Uh-huh.
So,
Yeah. Anything else? Anything else that you want to share with us about either your experience with imposter syndrome or things about you that kind of make this happen?
I think, well, I love this series of yours. When you got, what was it, Learn-a-Palooza? I finally met you in person.
Yeah. There's your monster. Love it.
I got my imposter monster who still sits on my desk and is also a reminder that this is perception versus reality.
That's right.
It's just good to know that everybody's got this. We all have this. That it's it is the and it okay, I know it's men and women, but I honestly believe women actually even deal with it more than men.
Could be. We're going to find out.
I mean, yeah, really?
We're going to find out. Yeah, eventually, someday.
I mean, I know guys get it too, a lot, but I think, I don't know. I feel like a lot of times half my imposter syndrome is because I'm being compared to a guy. And I feel like I can't measure up. And that's part of it too.
So let me ask a little deeper question on that. So who's comparing you to a guy?
Well, a lot of times it's because it's in my situation, right? It's AI and I'm the only girl there. So when everybody else is being introduced or everybody else is talking, I am still that only female speaking up, that only female voice. And again, sometimes it's just so hard to make my voice heard. And again, I'm kind of like, well, they're listening to the men. Do I have to yell?
Right. Which is why women used to be put in mental hospitals for hysteria, because we were just trying to make sure you could hear us. That's all.
Right.
But yeah, so okay, so going back to that question, we're having a little coach therapy moment here. So
I told you should get certified as a coach.
I should, maybe. Who is doing the comparing in those situations?
Again, perception versus reality. I should put a big background on my computer. Hey, Michelle, perception versus reality.
Yeah. Comparison is the thief of joy.
Ooh.
Yeah. I didn't write that. I don't know who did, but it was smart. So I remembered it. But yeah, so I think it's important, I think, that the folks listening hear you say that. Not just that, you're the one comparing, but that when you're being introduced or when you're sitting in a meeting and you're the only woman there, which, by the way, is not because you're the only woman that knows anything about AI. It's just you're the only woman on the team right now.
Right.
And
that's it.
You notice that.
I'm the only woman on the team.
Right. And you notice that. You go in, you sit down, you recognize that everyone in here is wearing some sort of musk except for you. Right. You got your floral cologne or your floral perfume. My point is, you're wearing pink, right? You recognize and you feel that difference between you and them, even if it's just the difference between your female and their male. And so, like, that's one of the biggest triggers, most common triggers, is just feeling different than everyone else.
Yeah.
And so it makes sense that that's when you feel that. And it's not because they're comparing. I mean, because like you said, maybe they're having it too. Maybe they're feeling that way about you in the room. And I don't know, we'd have to ask them. And most of them would probably not tell us the truth because
Yeah.
fill in the blank.
I'm sure actually the guys that I work with probably have just as much imposter syndrome as I do. I mean, honestly, we're all humanities majors.
Yeah.
But I just, I do. And it's maybe because we're all humanities majors is why everybody's so verbose. And I feel like I've got to.
You got to be like, hold on. The chick has something to say.
Quiet. Please listen to me.
Yep. Let me. Yeah. I got something I got to say. Yeah.
But it's just like, sometimes it's just like, maybe they don't want to hear my voice. And again, it's in my head. And I know that.
Definitely.
I know it. Mm-hmm. But that doesn't mean I don't listen to the little...
It doesn't mean the feeling isn't real. Like, please know, like I believe you. I have been there. I have felt that exact same thing, except not about AI, but yes, like the feeling is real. But what you're feeling, the object of your feeling is not, it's a story that we're kind of telling ourselves. And you're not the only one. I mean, obviously you're not alone in this. And that kind of leads us to like sort of the last question I have for you, which is, why did you want to be part of this imposter syndrome project?
Because when I learned from you that this is common, this is everybody. This is not just me. I'm a normal human being because I feel this way.
Yeah.
Everybody needs to know they feel this way. That it's just, I mean, everybody needs to know they're not alone. I guess we're all the same this way. And it helps me. I mean, it just really helps me to know that there are really, really smart people out there who have imposter syndrome. And then there are normal people like me who have imposter syndrome. And we've all got it.
We've all got it. And I think, Michelle, we would group you into with those really, really smart people.
You are just like stroking my ego right now.
I'm not. I am not. I am not bullshitting you.
And I have a hang up. That's all.
Well, but I want to take the opportunity to say that if you, Michelle, are making two categories of super smart people and regular people, you should put yourself with the super smart people.
I appreciate that.
Okay. And we appreciate you. And I'm so grateful that you came and shared your experience with us. So thank you so much, Michelle Lentz, for sharing that. And thanks to the listeners. I hope that you'll continue with this series and hear more stories about dealing with imposter syndrome. There are so many amazing people that deal with this every day, and sharing their story helps them and you feel less alone. So be sure to follow If You Ask Betty on LinkedIn and YouTube for more episodes and resources, and tell your friends about it. Hit that share button so that they too know that they're not alone. Peace out.